Hello, this is another part of the continuing dialogue. Now, in my previous video, which is the second part, I said, for example, that everything is experience based, that hard evidence isn't in fact hard evidence. It's indicators, it's things that are being indicated, and that both of them take their meaning from experience and experiencing. And I was quoting Einstein on that one. I can quote other people as well. The philosopher Eugene Gendelin also has written quite an incredible book called Experiencing and the Creation of Meaning. And in particular, he's looking at how language is meaningful. Now, it's very complex, but I just want to outline very briefly the thinking process in terms of child development, just to put this into context. Children start off, or babies start off with experiencing, and they start off with knowledge, experiential knowledge. They already know when they're hungry, and they know when to cry when they're hungry. They know that if they're being cuddled and they're hungry, it doesn't satisfy, and they continue to cry. So, it's going to adjust that. So we start off with a whole load of experiential knowledge. Now later on, the thinking process is indeed the interaction of language from experience. So language will symbolise and conceptualise experience. The baby is hungry. Later on, the baby can say, "I am hungry," and again, there has to be an experiential route to that. The child can lie, of course, and eventually say, "Well, I'm hungry," when the child isn't hungry, and the child can misconstrue. But meaning in language is indeed a synthesis of experiencing, language that carries forward that experience, and indeed logic that is also very useful in terms of whether things coherently are logical, inductive, or deductive logic is very important. So that's the background to it. Experiencing, both in the philosophy of Gendelin and in Einstein's view, is absolutely essential. It's without experiencing and the process of experiencing, language becomes literally meaningless, without significance. So we're going to then have a look at, I've already argued that experiencing lay at the root of evidence. If you remove experience from evidence, the evidence ceases to be meaningful. So I'm now going to have a look particularly at certain evidence for the spiritual, in inverted commas. Now, the first thing to note is that we experience the world in which we live. And it's very interesting that we have an assumption, and I think it's a perfectly reasonable assumption, that what we experience, if you like, is at least an approximate guide to what is there, and that we're experiencing something that a world which is both external to us, but which we are also actually interlinked with. We are very much interlinked with the universe in which we live, and indeed we also form a part of that universe, since we're operating in it. Now, the materialistic assumptions, philosophical assumptions, come in when and this is where sort of Occam's razor becomes, in a sense, less relevant, in that materialistic assumptions basically state that what we experience is really there, but that what we have as inner experiences or numinous experiences are simply the byproducts of our brain. Now that is a basic assumption, that it has a different explanation for when I am dialoguing with you. It assumes that you're there, but when I'm having an inner experience, it assumes that this is simply a byproduct of the brain. Now you talked about MRI scans and hard evidence. Now, as I point out, you've got the MRI scan, you've got the actual brain activity, which it's an indicator of, and then you make sense of that brain activity with the experiencing of the person whose brain is being scanned. Now, it's quite obvious from MRI evidence or MRI information, as supported through experience, that when I'm experiencing you, I have different parts of the brain light up, and indeed when I'm experiencing other types of experience, numinous experiences, certain parts of the brain light up. Now that's common. I think that's common ground. What is not common ground is indeed the very nature of those numinous experiences. And the evidence is that numinous experiences, for example, can give us information that we wouldn't ordinarily have access to. Let me give you an example. This is a book by William West called Spiritual Issues in Therapy, Relating Experience to Practice. Now, he gives two very interesting examples. Quite frequently, when he's counselling somebody who is bereaved, both he and the person he's counselling will suddenly have a sense of presence in the room, that somebody else is there, and quite often, frequently, the person being counselled says, "Oh, it's really odd. That's Uncle Fred," or "That's Auntie Julie," or whoever it is. Now, quite clearly, this is evidence, but what is it evidence of? Now, when I say I'm experiencing you, I would say that's evidence of my experience of you. When I'm experiencing a sense of presence, what on earth, why would Occam's razor say that I'm not actually experiencing someone when I have that sense of presence? Now, Occam's razor surely wouldn't actually prevent that from being a good explanation. It's not an additional assumption to believe that you exist. Neither is it an additional assumption to say that when I have a sense of presence, I'm experiencing somebody. It's only materialistic paradigms that would prevent you from reaching that conclusion. And I've got another example too, but I'm noticing that I'm now running out of my 10 minutes again. So I will continue the dialogue, I promise.